Hey! Guys, tonight we're diving into some funny stories about historical figures. Picture this. A young, ambitious future king galloping around on horseback, dreaming of world domination. But here's the thing. Alexander the Great didn't just dream of conquering lands. He was obsessed with finding the perfect horse. I mean, a king's gotta have a royal steed, right? From a very young age, Alexander showed a deep love for horses, with his father, King Philip II of Macedon, even getting him one of the finest horses available at the time. But Alexander wasn't about to settle for just any steed. No, he had high standards. Historians still argue whether it was love at first sight when Alexander met Bucephalus, but what we do know is that this wasn't just a simple bond. It was the beginning of a legendary partnership. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to hear where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. Let me know in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you settle in, let's talk about Bucephalus, the horse that became the most famous steed in history. Bucephalus wasn't just any horse, though. He was described as a massive, jet-black beauty with a star-shaped mark on his forehead. But here's the kicker. He was considered unrideable by almost everyone. Yep, even the most skilled horsemen in Macedonia had tried and failed to tame him. But not Alexander. You see, Alexander wasn't just a regular teenager. He was already showing signs of his future greatness. Historians still argue whether he was just that brave, or if he was simply incredibly stubborn, probably a bit of both. At just 12 years old, Alexander took one look at Bucephalus and decided that he was the perfect horse for him. With a little courage and a lot of determination, Alexander managed to ride Bucephalus, impressing his father and the rest of the court. This moment became the beginning of one of history's most famous partnerships. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Remember that time we mentioned the map error Napoleon made? Well, Alexander wasn't exactly flawless either. Now imagine this. Alexander, already a young conqueror in the making, riding his beloved Bucephalus through the rugged landscapes of Macedon. But things weren't always smooth sailing. Alexander didn't exactly pick up a horse and ride off into the sunset. No, his early trials with horses were full of mishaps. Some of his early horses couldn't even handle the pressure of a ride around the royal courtyard, let alone a battle. And that's the funny thing. Here's the future ruler of the known world, a strategic genius, yet his quest to find the perfect horse sometimes felt like a failed audition. Historians still debate whether Alexander's obsession with the perfect horse was a bit over the top, considering his skills on the battlefield. But hey, if you're going to conquer the world, you might as well have a reliable horse, right? Bucephalus wasn't just another steed. He was part of the grand plan. And clearly, Alexander wasn't about to settle for anything less than perfect, even if it meant a few awkward trial runs. All right, so picture this. Alexander, at just 12 years old, strutting up to a horse that no one else could handle. Bucephalus, the wild, untamable beast, stood there like he was the king of the world, until Alexander decided to prove that he could be the one to tame him. Historians still argue whether it was pure bravery or just sheer arrogance, but what we know for sure is that Alexander wasn't backing down. In a bold move, he turned Bucephalus around and rode him right into history. It's said that once Alexander tamed him, Bucephalus became his most trusted companion. The young king was so proud of his achievement that he reportedly told his father, "My horse is worth more than your army." Of course, that might be a bit of teenage bravado, but Alexander's confidence wasn't misplaced. Bucephalus went on to become more than just a horse. He was a symbol of Alexander's power. You have to admit, that's a pretty impressive "I told you so" moment, right? Fast forward a bit, and we find Alexander riding Bucephalus into some of the most intense campaigns in history. As you can imagine, their bond only grew stronger as they conquered lands, battled fierce enemies, and faced life-threatening challenges together. One of their most memorable moments came during the Persian campaign, where Bucephalus proved to be more than just a noble steed. He was practically Alexander's co-conqueror. The pair charged through the battlefield, with Bucephalus deftly maneuvering through tight spots and carrying Alexander to victory. But let's not forget, this wasn't just a smooth ride into glory. There were plenty of moments where Alexander's patience was tested. I mean, imagine riding a horse through rough terrain in a foreign land for days, trying to maintain a semblance of composure while your horse, no matter how loyal, might get a little tired and frustrated. Historians still argue whether Alexander's relentless pursuit of military conquest was fueled by his need for glory or the unshakable trust he had in his horse. But one thing's for sure, wherever Alexander went, Bucephalus was never far behind. Now let's talk about the Indian campaign. Alexander had already conquered a massive portion of the known world, but his journey took a dramatic turn when he marched into India. And guess what? Bucephalus was right there by his side. But this wasn't a stroll through the Macedonian countryside. Oh no, this was a full-on test of endurance. The terrain was rough, the climate was harsh, and the battles were intense. But Alexander and Bucephalus, they were a dynamic duo. There's even a story that during the Battle of the Hydaspes River, Bucephalus was the one to help Alexander break through enemy lines. Historians still argue whether this moment was as dramatic as it sounds, but the fact remains, this horse was instrumental in some of Alexander's greatest victories. However, it wasn't all glory. By the time they reached India, Bucephalus was exhausted from the grueling journey, and that's when the real test of their bond began. Could a great leader and his horse continue to endure together? Spoiler alert, not exactly. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. After years of battle, travel, and countless victories, Bucephalus's time finally came during the campaign in India. It's said that the intense climate and rigorous battles were simply too much for the mighty steed. In 326 BC, after a particularly grueling battle, Bucephalus died from exhaustion. Imagine this. Alexander, the man who had conquered nearly the entire known world, now faced the loss of his beloved horse. The man who had never shown fear in battle, the man who stood tall in front of armies and empires, was heartbroken. Historians still debate the emotional toll this loss took on Alexander. Was it just a horse, or did the bond between them run deeper than anyone could understand? The death of Bucephalus left a significant mark on Alexander, and some sources suggest he even mourned for days. It wasn't just a loss of a horse, it was the end of an era. But Alexander, ever the ambitious ruler, wasn't about to let Bucephalus's memory fade into the background. To honor his loyal companion, Alexander did something truly remarkable. He founded a city in Bucephalus's name. Yes, you heard that right. He named a city after his horse. The city, known as Bucephala, was built near the site of Bucephalus's death in present-day Pakistan. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine tribute to his horse, or if it was just another example of Alexander's tendency to name things after himself or his victories. But still, the act itself was extraordinary. A city founded by a king in memory of a horse. Could there be a more fitting testament to their bond? And this wasn't some small, insignificant settlement. Bucephala became a thriving city for many years. It's almost as if Alexander wanted to ensure that, even in death, Bucephalus would continue to ride alongside him in spirit. Even after Alexander's death, Bucephalus lived on in legend. His name was etched into the minds of those who knew the story of the great conqueror and his extraordinary horse. But the legacy didn't end with the city. Bucephalus was immortalized in art, literature, and even coinage. The bond between Alexander and his horse was something people remembered and admired for generations. Historians still debate whether the legend of Bucephalus was inflated over time, but one thing's for sure, the horse became a symbol of loyalty, strength, and the unbreakable connection between a leader and his trusted companion. So, while Alexander's empire might have crumbled eventually, the image of him riding Bucephalus into battle remained immortal in the minds of those who followed in his footsteps. It's strange, isn't it? A horse that never spoke a word, but became just as famous as the man who rode him into history. And so, as we wrap up the tale of Alexander the Great and his legendary steed, Bucephalus, we can't help but smile at the quirky, yet deeply meaningful bond between them. From a rebellious young king taming an untamable horse to their many triumphs on the battlefield, their story became something more than just a historical footnote. It became a symbol of determination, loyalty, and the unexpected friendships that shape history. As you drift off to sleep tonight, think of that wild ride, the thunder of hooves against ancient earth, and the relentless pursuit of greatness. Alexander's legacy may have been built on more than just his horse, but Bucephalus was certainly the wind beneath his wings. Well, hooves, to be precise. The next time you hop on a horse, or, let's be honest, just sit back in a chair and pretend, remember that sometimes the most enduring legends are the ones built on something as simple as trust and a shared ride. Now, let the peaceful rhythm of their story wash over you and drift into a dream where even the wildest of journeys are made a little easier with the right companion by your side.